So I think we've all had the time when you get out of the water and you're like, I just don't like the way the kite feels. So I'm going to go through a few ideas on how to make your kite feel a bit different. So tuning the way that the kite flies to the way that you want to be riding. So I'm going to go through different line lengths, different bar lengths, and a few different settings on the kite that will impact the way that it flies. So fundamentally, we've only got 3 lines that really impact the kite. We've got our main power line, which all of your power is going through. And then we've got our 2 steering lines, right? Let's start out with the first thing you can do that can improve the way your kite flies. So probably in your lessons, you've had to play with the trim strap, right? So that's going to increase or decrease the amount of power. So what that's effectively doing is that's moving your range on your bar. So if I let out my trim strap, it's going to effectively lengthen my front lines. So you'll find all bars have an adjustment in the end cap of the bars. So usually it's like this, sometimes it's on the bottom, but what we've got is a few knots that we can move this. So we can then essentially trim out, so the knots to adjust the trim of your kite within your bar can also be under your floats. Our next adjustment that we can do is on our kite. So most people will have seen this. There's usually 3 knots that you've got on your kite, so you can move it between. The duotone have hard, medium and soft. So what that's really doing is that's adjusting the leverage you have on your steering lines. So keep in mind that any impact your bar has is coming through these 3 lines. So if I move between my soft setting and my hard setting, it's going to steer the kite harder for the amount of steering I input. But also consider that my power also relates to that position as well. So it will actually make my bar more sensitive as I move it towards the center. Another setting that people don't really think about is that we have a bar size and we've got kite lines, right? So the size of your bar and the length of your kite lines will impact dramatically the way the kite flies. If you're finding that your kite is really sluggish to turn, maybe getting a much longer bar will improve that. So for instance, on my 12 meter, I found that going to a 60 centimeter bar dramatically improved the way the kite flies. It makes it from, quite sluggish in the sky to turning quite fast. So you probably will have been taught in your lessons that if you want to turn the kite really fast, you're going to pull the bar in and turn really hard. So that's true. But what that's also doing is it's applying pressure to both lines. So that turn will generate more power than if I could pull that line in without also pulling the center lines. So your bar length will effectively make your turning faster without increasing the power of those turns. So if you just want to improve the turning speed, that's probably the way to go. The other thing that really impacts the way the kite flies is the length of lines. So for me, whenever I fly my 8 meter, I really like the 22 meter lines. That works quite nicely. It brings the kite in closer to me. But if I'm flying the 12 meter kite, I find the 24 meter lines work for me a lot better. It gives me a similar sized wind window if you think about the turning circle of the kite. So that 2 meters extra line gives me a slightly bigger wind window. So this also has a few other impacts. So longer lines will increase the amount of area the kite can fly in, which will mean that you can generate more power. It also brings the kite up higher, which will catch more wind and more of the stronger wind. The wind at the ground, as you know, if you drop your kite down low, the wind at the ground is usually quite light. If you bring the kite up to at least 1 wingspan height, you'll have a lot more power. So increasing the line lengths will increase the power on your kite slightly, and it will also give you a lot more space to move the kite around. So if you're finding that your kite's not quite got enough space for you to do a full loop, if you're after loops, then maybe try increasing the lines on your kite. So quite often playing with these parameters will really give you quite a different feeling kite, and it can really turn your kite that's super sluggish and not great fun into something that's really a lot better. I'll give you a fantastic example of this. I have a foil kite that I use while hydrofoiling. I used to fly this on 22-meter lines. So just by decreasing the line length, it made the kite much easier to maneuver around because I had a lot less wind window to cover. So when I'm trying to make my turns on the hydrofoil, moving from one side to the other is a lot faster, which means that I can keep the power ups of the board a lot better. But if I'm out doing tricks on the twin tip, I don't want to have really short lines because it's going to be super hard for me to do loops. But I probably want a slightly bigger bar because I want to be able to do those fast loops easier and not necessarily with pulling lots of power. So what if I want to try some of these settings, but I don't want to go out and get a whole bunch of new equipment? Well, the first one's really easy. If you want to play around with any of the bar settings or the trim or your kite settings, just give it a go, see what it's like. The difference between the hard setting and the soft setting on the kite is not significant. You will feel the difference, but it's not going to blow you away. If you want to try short lines, it is possible to halve your lines and fly the kite like that. I'll put a link to a video up the top on how to do that. Another way to adjust your kite lines is you can get extensions. You can get line extensions. So if you bought, for instance, a 20-meter set of lines, if you wanted to see what 24-meter lines would feel like, you can get a 4-meter line extension and then add that on, give it a go, see if it works. Maybe you can also have a 2-meter extension, which will give you a feel for what 22-meter lines feel like. In terms of bar length, look, a lot of the manufacturers make pretty much standard size bars, but I've found the Kite Attitude bar, they make a lot of varied length bars. So they make really big bars, and a lot of their bars have adjustable settings on them. So you can have a 60 centimeter bar that you can then drop down to, I think, 48 centimeters. If you're still looking to change the settings and you played around with bar sizes and line sizes, maybe trying different types of kites might be another way of looking at it. In general, your bow kites are going to be slower kites, but they're going to generate more power and have a wider wind range. But your C-shaped kites will tend to have more of a on-off type of power. So when you let the bar out, it will really drop down, but you'll be able to turn them super fast. So maybe do some experimentation, see if you can borrow a kite from a mate and have a go. I hope this gives you a few different ideas that you haven't maybe thought about, and you can experiment a bit and see what works for you. Let me know what you find out in the comments section below, and we'll have a chat about it.